Okay, dzień dobry. Dobry dzień. Sadzicie. Nie ma czasu, sadzicie. Ryklo. No, I'm just curious. So, how many people understand Slovak? You understand it? Okay. Oh, quite a lot. Okay. Um, okay, let's begin because picture's going to be taking at 12:50, and so definitely have to end by then. And please ask your questions using Slido, however you want to say it. And then if we run through them, then it can be passing the mic. I guess I will finish in 30 minutes, more or less. All right, depends how many additional comments I make. All right, you can see the title here, and you can see that my specialty is cross-cultural management in Japan. So my PhD is in this area, though I've studied linguistics, applied linguistics, and done a lot of research in that area, combining the two, looking at the characteristics of people who can adapt to different cultures and acquire new languages, focusing on their ability to come close to the way a native speaker speaks. So this is on the importance of affect or emotions. Okay, so affective factors, which basically are emotions, can determine success or failure. When you're in a foreign country, being able to live there without great emotional difficulties, as well as acquiring the language. And you see from this quote here, it says that learning a foreign language and the culture that goes with it is one of the most useful things we can do to broaden the empathy and imaginative sympathy and cultural outlook of children. Okay, so learning a foreign language does not happen just in the mind of the learner. Rather, it takes place in interaction between the learner in a certain social context. And in that context, we have imitation and modeling. So, what is affect? Aspects of emotion, mood, attitude that condition behavior. So I think most people realize that the learner's attitude towards the target language and culture and the users of it, as well as the learner's emotional responses, are very important when it comes to success or failure. And Arnold claimed that neither the cognitive aspect of language acquisition nor the affective is the last word. They cannot really be separated from one another because all learning is emotional. When we say values, our values, good, bad, is it useful for me? Is it not useful? We make constant judgments. We remember those things that have emotional significance. Okay, so the way we feel about ourselves and our capabilities can either facilitate or impede our learning and underline the difficulty of isolating the cognitive aspects. For at many points, affective inevitably enters the picture. So, on this subject, usually people mention the work of Krashen and his affective filter hypothesis. If you're familiar with that, please raise your hand. Okay, about 20%. All right, so it has three aspects: motivation, self-confidence, and anxiety. Okay, first let's look at motivation. So, performers with high motivation generally do better, and specifically integrative motivation. And you can see definition here, or more or less, like instrumental means to get a job, etc. For some some reason that's not directly related to a desire to integrate into society of the target language. Okay, so the next is self-confidence. And performers with self-confidence and a good self-image tend to do better in foreign language acquisition. And the third is anxiety. Low anxiety appears to be conducive to second language acquisition, but that's not saying completely get rid of the feeling that comes with anxiety, because a small amount can be motivational. All right? So we try harder because we don't want to make certain mistakes, etc. So Krashen talks about the affective filter. So when it's activated, it means it's blocking the acquisition of the language. Learning is not taking place. So when the filter is high, opportunities for learning or attaining comprehensible input decrease. Actually, your mind tends to go, when you have suffering from high anxiety, your mind tends to be focusing on many things at one time, self-focused, you miss what's coming in. Also, we can take a look at it more from a neurological standpoint, and when the, are you familiar with these terms? Yes? Okay, look at the brain. So when the amygdala senses threat, it becomes overactive. And it delays or blocks electrical activity conduction through the higher cognitive centers of the brain. Okay, so basically, if you're looking at this picture, you have the higher and then areas of the brain where we have the higher cognitive functions. They're higher up. And then you have the amygdala right down here in the red. Okay, so new information cannot pass as efficiently through the amygdala's affective filter to gain access to the brain's cognitive processing and memory storage areas, such as the left prefrontal cortex. Okay, yeah, before I go into that, I want to talk about anxiety a little bit more. Yesterday there was a talk about being able to learn while you're sleeping. Anybody attend? Okay. All right. So dreaming is extremely important for learning, especially episodic in the REM episode, rapid eye movement. So episodic dreams are when your brain is trying to make sense. It's taking everything you experienced to now and your total worldview and it's trying to fit it in there in a sense. That's a broad sense. Okay, now in a more specific sense, let's say you're learning a new language, and especially not so much vocabulary, but rather syntax and how the logical aspects, the semantical aspects of the language. That is what your brain is dealing with in REM sleep. Okay, if you have high anxiety, your cortisol levels are, if they're very high when you go to sleep, you're going to have very scattered dreams. If you remember your dreams, maybe one, you after a really stressful day, perhaps you remember a dream where it's not logical at all. Dreams don't tend to follow a logical pattern, but it's not a story. It's not an episode. Okay? So, well, I just wanted to mention that because that's where, if you're looking at learning while you're sleeping, you need to start to look at that area and not trying to put in new words while you're trying to sleep. That's, okay. I'd like to talk a lot about that, but, yeah. All right, but I'll go on. All right, so 86 Chinese students in a study I did at my university in Japan. I teach in Japanese mainly, but I have Chinese students, Nepali students, Vietnamese students, Thai students, Bengali students, on and on and on. And so I chose the Chinese students because they're majority. And I always notice that there are some Chinese students who, when they talk, I have to think, oh, is that person Chinese or Japanese? You know, they speak so well. And there are others, the second they open their mouth, Chinese. I wondered why. Some of these ones that I can recognize immediately had been in Japan around 10 years. Still, they do that. So I looked into it, okay? So I separated in 5 groups according to their ability in Japanese. And in other words, they had to do an interview and read something, and then I had Japanese people judge it. Okay. And then I used this global competencies inventory, a Chinese version, which is a 176 questionnaire, which takes a look at various aspects of their personality. And one of those is emotional resilience, which means the level of emotional strength and your ability to cope favorably with irritations, setbacks, frustrations, failures. Sounds like language learning, right? Okay, living in a different culture. And the capacity to recover quickly from psychologically and emotionally challenging situations. Again, sounds like speaking a foreign language in a stressful situation, etc. Okay, so these are sample questions. It takes time to get over a particularly stressful experience. I find little things often bother me. I have never been good at coping with negative emotions. Obviously, all these are reverse coded. Okay, you have 1 through 5, so you switch the answers. These are negative ones, in a sense. Okay. Emotional resilience represents the degree to which we are able to overcome such negative experience or feelings, and how long it takes to do so. So it's associated with coping potential and the foreign language learning process. Okay, here's the results. Anybody into statistics? There you go. Anyhow, it just basically says that there's a high positive correlation between emotional resilience, very strong score, and their ability in Japanese. And then I have the top 17 of the 86 and the bottom 17, and their mean score was significantly different. It was significantly higher mean score for the top 17. So the best 17 speakers of Japanese had a mean score much higher than the lowest 17 for emotional resilience. Okay, so people who are quick to recover from adversity or negative experiences show strong connections between the prefrontal cortex, okay, you can see it here, and the amygdala, which is responsible for handling the emotional aspects of our cognition, of our brain. Okay, so the prefrontal cortex quiets the signals associated with negative emotions, allowing the brain to plan and act effectively without distraction from negative emotions. So the amygdala is like what's when we should be fearful, we should turn our attention to something. It sends us a signal, okay, and that can lead to anxiety or stress. So how do we quiet the mind? So if you're stressed, how do you quiet the mind? Well, one way is mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, which it can strengthen the neural connections between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So when I say strengthen the connections, it means it gets stronger over time. The more you practice it, the stronger your connections are. Not used, they disappear, atrophy. It's not a one-time thing. I'm doing this for today because I feel stressed, so I have to speak, etc. Okay, we can observe what's happening in our mind and body. Or the external environment without reactivity or judgment, without moving to fix or run away. Okay, so mindfulness breaks the automaticity of our habitual reactions. It's okay? High anxiety. I will just observe that the microphone is making sounds while I'm trying to speak. Yes, thank you. I observed he gave me a new microphone and is still doing the same thing. The development of negative attitudes towards the target language, the culture of the target language, and or its native speakers can be expected to lower motivation to acquire language or, and importantly, the to mimic the communicative behavioral traits of native speakers. So the way they speak, their body language, you know. So if you're speaking Italian, or if you're speaking German, or you're speaking British, or you're speaking American, you know, you're speaking Japanese. If we have a strong negative or positive experience with a native speaker of foreign language or culture, or the culture of the foreign language, then we adapt to the think or read. Which one? Okay. We are apt to associate these feelings with the language in question. Okay, so we have this negative experience in the country or with a particular person, and it just associates automatically, unless you examine it, unless you observe it. Why? You have to observe your feelings when you're using this language and see if there's any negative. If there is, why? Positive, fine, you know. I mean, especially in romantic situations, it's very highly motivational, right? Very positive feelings. They can increase motivation. Okay, so negative feelings obviously have the opposite effect. So the amygdala assesses the motivational significance of emotion and emotional relevance of stimuli. In other words, is this important or is it not important? We do that constantly. What I'm saying right now, you're all doing it from the second I started talking. And also everything going on around you. Should I pay attention to this or that, or what is being said, etc.? Constantly we are doing this. We never stop. And so then the brain allocates attention and memory resources to various problems, and the variability in such allocations affects learning. All right? Can you imagine trying to concentrate 100%? You block everything out. Pretty difficult, isn't it? Okay, so what are the characteristics of these emotionally resilient people? They have a high level of emotional awareness. They tend to have a great deal of perseverance. They tend to have a strong internal locus of control, meaning they feel that they are in control. They don't blame other people. You know, all problems are self-created, which is true, hard to accept, but true. Okay, because the problem is how we react to something from the outside world. They don't feel like they're victims. And fourth, they tend to be optimistic, and they understand the value of social support. Okay, you have various types of language learners. You do have the more reclusive types who are trying to do it mainly cognitively, and then you have the very social types. Okay, I'm an extreme social type. Just come up and talk to me. I like to talk to everybody. It's not easy to talk to many people at one time, but yeah. Okay, so the next category is emotional sensitivity. I said I'd show two today of the 7 different things that are measured by the GCI, Global Competencies Inventory. And the second one is emotional sensitivity. Okay, it's the capacity to accurately read and comprehend the emotions of others and understand their feelings, understand their perspective. So how well one is able to listen genuinely and respond with empathy. Okay, so here are the sample questions. Please read, I want to break. Okay, thank you. That's good. Here's the results. Same comment. Okay, high positive correlation. Whoa, I turned it off. Hey, there it goes. My amygdala sent things to my brain. There we go. to my higher cognitive functions. Okay, so here's the same comment about the means. The top 17 has much higher mean score in this ability. Okay, so let's talk about this emotional sensitivity. For one thing, I'm sure everybody is aware of, there are culture-specific rules about who can show which emotions to whom and when. And learning about these cultural differences in rules is part of the process of enhancing one's ability to interact effectively in cross-cultural situations. For example, in Asia, it tends to be a lot less expression of emotions. But if you go to Italy, Brazil, places like that, okay, a lot higher in Europe, okay, you're not expressing as much in Scandinavia and Germany, okay, everybody's got it, yes, okay. All right, so there are considerable differences among individuals concerning willingness to expand the circle of people to whom they are emotionally sensitive. We could be emotionally sensitive to certain people, and not to, we are, everybody is, and not to others. But you'll have to learn to expand this in the sense that normally we have the in-group, out-group. So those who are similar to us, we are more emotionally sensitive, and those who are different, we're not. So if you want to be successful at cultural adaptation and foreign language acquisition, you expand your circle, you talk to strangers. Okay, this is Japan. This is somewhere where people are taking a chance to practice the languages. All right, so there's a natural tendency to be emotionally sensitive toward or empathize with those people with whom we identify the most, to just mention, okay, in-group versus out-group. Then next, curiosity. Curiosity can expand our empathy. When we get to know people outside the usual social circles, we get new worldviews. You get to know people more deeply, and then you have the possibility of greater empathy. Okay, there may be multiple definitions of empathy, but the most common ingredient is that empathy is or essentially involves a special kind of imagining that can be described as role-taking, perspective-taking, imaginative identification. Now, I don't know about everybody here, but I've loved languages from a very young age. And I also notice that whenever I see anyone, if I'm not concentrating on somebody else, on something specific, I often imagine what it's like to be that person. To look like that, to have that job, to have that problem. This is something that I constantly do. And I think for me, it's really helped in terms of acquiring a better prosody and accents in the languages I speak. And also, it's not just the way you speak, but also I think when this happens, you understand a worldview. And to really understand the language well, you have to understand the cultural background and worldview. Otherwise, you don't understand the higher levels of communication. All right? Okay, so the capacity to imagine other situations and mental states becomes essential to our understanding of the thoughts and feelings that facilitate our interactions with them. So how do we interact? If we have a high emotional sensitivity and understanding, then that will enliven the interaction, conversation, give you energy, okay? So when your emotional energy is up, you can learn a lot more. You've calmed down the stress and anxiety. The emotional significance of what you're talking about is much higher. You're more likely to remember it. I mean, I can remember phrases from 40 years ago in a foreign language that I had in a conversation, just because what that person said was quite meaningful at that time. Okay, so emotional sensitivity, especially in the terms of sensitivity that develops when one identifies with a reference group, or people who speak that language in that culture. This is very important in developing a native-like accent. Okay, you have the mechanics, okay, so you can work on that. I mean, there are certain sounds you cannot distinguish in a new language at times, but what you do is you pay attention to it. And then you get it exaggerated, and then you create the neural networks. I talked about it yesterday if you came to the talk. Okay, you create the neural networks which allow you to understand it first and then produce it yourself. Okay, has anybody ever heard of this guy, Griora? Okay, it's quite a long time ago. He's really interesting guy. He experiments with alcohol. If you ever seen somebody put on one of the discussions, can you speak a language better when you're drinking alcohol? Well, you can. There's at the first point when you drink too much, all gone. Okay, but he does, not only alcohol. He uses sedatives too in his experiments. He did experiments which at university, which now might be prohibited, getting graduate students drunk and giving them various downers and such. Okay, so this was the 60s, It was in the U.S. Okay, who got Timothy Leary throw some LSD and ooh, see how we can speak now. I can see the grammar. It's in the law. You see the nominative case in that. Okay, so anyhow, he suggested that empathy might play a significant role in a learner's relative ability to acquire authenticity or pronunciation in the second language. So he demonstrated that the more empathetic individuals tend to be better listeners and better attuned to the native features of speech. Therefore, emphatic individuals tend to acquire more native-like proficiency in the target language. Oh, I'm done. Okay, because I have a lot less slides than yesterday. I went fast. I had 70. But okay, so it leaves time for questions. If you don't have any, we can all go to lunch. No, I just want to point out that you can read this paper here. You can download it for free. Actually, that's the last slide there. Okay. So. Yes. I just did that because I needed you to give me some applause. Thank you. But I'll go back to this one while we're dealing with questions in case you want to take a picture of it. Because I talk a lot about these. I've written a number of papers on the subject of personality traits that facilitate or hinder language acquisition, and also about the age factor in language acquisition and sounding like a native speaker, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so you can download any of these papers here at Academic EDU. Okay, so you have the questions?
We have some questions from Slido. How do you increase your integrative motivation? How do you increase your integrative motivation?
Yeah, okay. How do you increase your... How do you like somebody more? How do you convince yourself to like a certain culture or a certain group of people, a certain language? Now, this is a tough question, you see what I mean? Because that's what you're talking about. You're talking about do you like it or don't you like it? It's emotions. What value does it have to you? So if you say, what values? Oh yeah, I want to learn German because I'm going to go get a job in Germany. Well, that's the instrumental, right? So, but I knew this German, and this and such person was so nice, and the culture is very interesting, and okay, so yeah, you see where I'm going? Okay, so that's not a question. That's a question you have to ask yourself, and then you have to think how you feel about that particular target language and such. Okay, next one.
How do you make your attitude more positive? Almost the same, right? Shall I ask another one, right? Okay. Could you?
It's okay. Okay. There are books, right, about optimism. How to become learned optimism. That's a very good book. Now, I would recommend. Do you know it? Learned optimism. Okay, you know it. Okay, Ruslan knows it. Did you read it? English or Russian? Okay, doesn't really matter. But learned optimism. If you learn to become optimistic, you're learning to be positive. Positivity. It was about positivity, wasn't it? That was the question. Okay. Yeah.
What next? How to learn mindfulness?
Hmm?
Yes. How and where to learn mindfulness?
Okay.
How and where learn mindfulness? You can have a look at this. This one that you can just
Okay. Thanks.
decide whatever you want to.
Where is it?
Yeah.
How and where to learn mindfulness? Oh, just go to the internet and put in mindfulness. Mindfulness meditation. You can go to Amazon and buy 100 books. Now, some are better than others. I mean, if you're asking about my personal experience, I mean, there's been many factors. I think for me, the greatest was fasting and meditation and yoga. You know, from understanding my body, you know, feeling my body. And when I would fast, over 1 month's time with 10 days in the middle, only liquids, I get to a certain state where I would go into meditation and I create a certain awareness that I can keep with me until I eat too much junk food again. And yeah, there's a lot of, you know, how to. I'm not a real fan of how-to books. I try to figure it out myself. But no, how should I say? I am a fan and I want to see what other people say, but if it doesn't click with me, I turn it off, go to the next one, turn it off, like that kind of thing, you know, until it clicks, right? Because we create our own problems. You can't turn to somebody else to solve your problems, that type of thing. That's the same as developing mindfulness, realizing that that's the truth. How do you make your ad more positive? Could you identify differences across cultures with emotional awareness or suppression? With emotional awareness, I don't think you can. With emotional suppression, certainly you can. With expression of emotions, and maybe that's a type of suppression. It depends whether you think that, you know, people say, get it off your chest, you know, talk about it. Depends on the kind of culture you grew up in and how you deal with stress and negativity. But yeah, there definitely are differences in culture and how people deal with negative feelings. Can the bottom 17 improve practically in this study? Yeah, I think if they become more aware of, for example, there are Koreans in Japan, okay? I've known some Koreans in Japan, been there a long time, and they still say, Daigaku gakusei. Okay, now listen to Japanese. Daigaku gakusei. Now listen to Korean. Daigaku gakusei. You hear it? Daigaku gakusei. Daigaku gakusei. Gakusei is Japanese. Gakusei in Korean, you can't start the sound with kak. So, like that, it's a stronger one. All right, so I noticed that one big difference is the ones that can't do it, they don't have a strong affinity for Japanese culture, Japanese people. I mean, they live there, they're doing okay, but there's a difference in how they feel about the language and such. So I guess the people can improve. One, if they notice it, they can try to force improvement, you know, where you do like the speech therapy, things like that, and on and on. That can help, but that's the mechanics. It's never really going to happen till you get, you know, the emotions, the heart. How do you increase your, no, how do you measure empathy? With questionnaires like that. Could you define what motivation means more specifically? For me, it's a positive word, but I'm mostly frustrated, so I wonder if that means I'm just stubborn. Okay, who's that? Yeah, can we have the other mic? Because I want some interaction on this one. I don't understand exactly what you're driving at that sense. I mean, I define motivation and give you, like more terms, what it means or what?
No, I mean more what you mean by motivated, because for me that's a positive word. That I don't really feel positive when I do language learning. I just feel frustrated and angry and.
Well, that's the emotional resilience one, right? Emotional resilience. So you getting over your frustrations and such. Okay? So more you have to look at that than anything else, and then perhaps just look out why, or try to think of why you feel frustrated. Maybe it's the kind of goal you set, and I would look beyond language in that, and anything on all small, medium, and large goals that you set, and how you react. How you react when you're not on. Maybe you have a schedule in your mind about where you want to be all the time, and if you don't reach it, then you're frustrated. It seems that would be the case. Yeah. Is it okay? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. Could you do it for me? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Can you? Yeah. Kijk, hoor eens po Engels, taki accent. Okay. Oh, you brought it down for me. Thank you. If certain societies are so open emotionally, example Spanish, are they so empathetic, etc.? No. Why are their second language acquisition skills so poor? No. Open. That thing about emotional expression has nothing to do with. Well, it does in a sense. Okay, being empathetic. The kind of empathy we're talking about. In other words, putting yourself. You can have somebody who's very emotional, but what they're doing is they're always expressing their own outlook, not thinking about what the other person is experiencing. Right? Oh, it's just for me. That's supposed to be Italian, or brat or something. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Okay, somebody could be very emotionally expressive, but that's not what we're talking about. Because we're talking about putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else and taking their perspective. So it's a different thing. Okay, so then this one here. How do you help students who have low self-esteem or don't tend to have a positive mindset? I don't get involved with that because I teach management. I teach cross-cultural management, international accounting, economics, things like that. So I'm not a language teacher. So I never really, get into that. So how would I do it? Point out that they don't have a positive mindset and see if they want to change it, I guess. You have to make a person aware of something. Well, you really can't you can try to help them become aware of it, but they have to find the path. Can you learn to love a language and culture again after a series of negative experiences? You meaning in general or me? Who wrote this question? Okay.
In general, can a person learn to do this? Any person?
Yeah, but once you go in general, then you can't really answer it because everybody's different, right? So, you mean, is it possible in that sense? Is it? Oh, yeah, of course. Don't you think it's possible? I mean, if you look at, let's say, certain people, when it comes to language, okay, and maybe I should avoid talking about certain countries. Okay, but let's say there's a country that invaded another country, and then they developed this very negative attitude towards the language they were forced to learn, and they didn't learn it. But then later in life, they got interested, and then maybe they met somebody from that country, and then they fell in love, and maybe they had many negative experiences from. I think. From my perspective, personally, there's never been a language I didn't like the sound of particularly. I like some more than others. It's not the language itself, it's the people and the culture behind it for me, okay? So I would say, yeah, it's possible. Where are the new ones? They come up higher? Further down? But I already answered further down. Is there anyone I missed here? Somebody wants to ask? I think that sees. Okay, well, then whose phone is this? Yours? Can we just open it up to anybody who wants to ask a question? Or yes, over here.
Okay, when you speak to the stranger, do you consider yourself like more or less expressive person, and why?
When I hold on, keep the mic.
Okay.
When I speak with strangers, do I consider myself
Well,
more?
like more expressive, like for example, people from Brazil and so on,
I
or
change
less?
according to the person, and I think most people do. I mean, that's natural. Even if you're monolingual, we do the same. Yeah. So if I have a lot of experience in that language, you know, just not knowing the language well, but a lot of interaction in that language. Okay. I mean, you could learn the language through, let's say, a book or something, and then you never interacted. Okay, so if I've had a lot of interaction, then I naturally go that way, quickly. But we all adjust to the other person. It's called the chameleon effect, and if you look and Google it, okay, and you
Okay.
can see it occurs all the time. Even in monolinguals, the way the number of verbs they use, passive verbs, active verbs, depending on the language, right? What comes up.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Yeah. Okay.
I found it very, very interesting, the questionnaire that you did with your students, your Chinese students. Do you think you might do it again in the future with other nationalities? Because that would be really interesting to be able to compare the nationalities.
Okay, the questionnaire that I use is a product of the Kozai group, which is a group of consultants who are all from the same field as I am, cross-cultural management type field. And normally they charge significant amount of money for companies that use it for their employees. It's used to decide who should we. Okay, we want to send these people abroad. Amongst these people, can we predict whether they'll fail or not? Because it's very costly to send an executive abroad and have that executive come back. I'm talking sometimes about $1 million or more. Okay, and all the costs that involved at high level. All right. So that's why this questionnaire is put together in the first place. And so I just got the data that I'm not a quantitative-oriented person, but sometimes in academia you have to feed these people who are. So I went out and got some food, and then I can put it out there, and then I can discuss why, I knew this was true before I ever got the food. All right. No, I mean, yeah, quantitative research is important. But basically what I'm saying is, no, I wouldn't do it again because they gave it to me for free and I did the study and, but somebody else could. Just contact the Kozai group.
A follow-up on the bottom 17 one. Did you find that those people were aware of their issues, or were they just completely unaware that they had bad accent problems and they also had like emotional or other issues that were related to that test? Like, were they self-realizing?
Normally when you do this questionnaire, then you do get your feedback. And then along with the feedback, you get a lot of discussion from the consultants. I'm not allowed to give them the feedback, okay? And also I didn't look to see who did what. That's kind of the condition of, using it. Because it can be a big problem. When you assess somebody and then you tell them, you are this, it becomes a stigma to them. And it's not all really negative. People are just like that. Not everybody is into living in a different culture and learning a different language, It's not their cup of tea, So, no. That was a much shorter answer, yeah. Anybody else? Yes, over here. Zogging.
There's a group photo.
Oh, last question? Picture time.
So, lady
We
first.
could take a picture.
Last
question, yes.
Have you thought about, or are you aware of any studies on how this might interact with age?
How these factors interact with age.
Yeah. So whether, for example, younger learners have...
Can you teach an old dog new tricks? Kind of thing? Question?
Potentially, yeah, but also maybe for younger learners, whether they have different...
You mean
different factors
changing
come into
behavior by
play.
changing, by let's say that somebody's low in emotional sensitivity, emotional resilience. So to that we're looking here. And so depending on what age you are, it's easier or difficult to do something about it, is your question, right?
More whether there might be a difference in these type of characteristics at different age groups, and whether that...
Well, yeah, of course there are, because people mature. I mean, when you take perspective, right? You need to hit a certain age before it's something you develop. So yeah, when you're looking at adolescents, you know, their view of the world, their ability to put themselves... sometimes that's a complicated question, obviously. But if you're talking about modification of behavior, then you really have to talk about modification of their awareness, first of it, and then if they have the desire to do something about that, to increase it. Now, keep in mind that overly emotionally sensitive, being able to quickly putting yourself in every other's shoes can be also a big problem, all right? There's a balance in everything. All right? You see something, oh, it's so hurt, I feel hurt, oh, you have a stomachache, I have a stomachache, you know, type thing, okay? All right, that's it. It's time to go to lunch. Thank you.